Welcome everybody, it's Todd Costello from RE/MAX Center Realty. It is September of 2024 and it is time for the monthly value message. This month we're talking about how the new realtor commission structures and guidelines from the National Association of Realtors affect buyers. Next month I will cover the seller effects of those new changes and new guidelines. So what I want to start with is how has it been working, and then we'll go into what the new changes are. So very briefly, the way it's been working for approximately 150 years, this is how buyer's agents got compensated, were paid. You had a commission, and the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. The seller's agent would hire a realtor to list their home and sell it, and the seller's agent would charge a commission. The entire commission would go to the seller's agent. And we know the numbers, commissions have always been negotiable, but 6% is the number most people are familiar with. Maybe occasionally it's 5%, whatever it is, 6%, 5%, whatever it is, negotiable. The seller's agent would charge the seller that amount would come to the seller's agent, and then the seller's agent would pay out a portion of this, usually about half, to the buyer's agent. Not only that, but the buyer's agent knew how much they were getting paid because that amount was disclosed through the multiple listing service. That's the realtor system that the agents use to share listings, show each other's listings. So the buyer's agent always knew what they were going to be compensated before they showed a property that was listed for sale. So this was about 150 years. Okay? So that's how it was working for 150 years. What's happening now is the lawsuits and the settlement that the National Association of Realtors agreed to, the buyer's agent part of the commission that the seller paid is no longer disclosed through the MLS. So properties are still listed in the MLS, but if you're a buyer and you want to hire a realtor and they're going to show you a home, they have no idea. Your agent is going to have no idea if the seller's agent is willing to compensate you. So therefore, these are the changes. Buyers and their agents. Number one, this has always been the case, but it was more of a guideline. Now it's a fact. Buyers must sign a buyer agency contract before you look at a property. So if any realtor ever shows you a listed property and they do not have you sign contracts, it's a business relationship agreement. It's going to have negotiable terms on it, but it's going to outline the fee that the buyer is going to have to pay their agent if their agent cannot get compensated from any other party. So you're going to have to sign a contract, and as far as what the fee is going to be, you'll negotiate that with your agent. So just keep that in mind. You have to look at a property, and you have to be, number two, the buyer must be prepared to pay their buyer's agent. And the main thing here is prepared. We're only 3 weeks into these new rules and new guidelines, and what I'm experiencing, speaking to a lot of agents, selling a few homes in that period, the buyers must be prepared to pay their agent, but so far, I hesitate to say most because it's too soon, but in that short window of time, most sellers are still willing to compensate the buyer's agent because the seller understands, or many sellers have understand so far, that what is the incentive of the buyer's agent to show the property if the seller is not willing to compensate them to bring their buyer, number one, and number two, if the seller is not willing to compensate the buyer or offer some type of incentive to the buyer's agent, then the buyer is going to have to pay their agent, which means they're going to look at a $500,000 home as far as the list price, and they're going to say, all right, it's $500,000 plus the fee that I have to pay my buyer's agent, which is they've not been familiar with for 150 years. So these are the things we're going to have to work through over the next 6, 12, 24 months and see how it really pans out. But you must sign a buyer agency contract. You cannot show a house without it. And you must be prepared, because you don't want to fall in love with your dream home. Maybe in that situation, the seller's not willing to compensate a buyer's agent to walk away from a property that you're going to live in with your family for 5 to 10 years that meets all your needs. You want to consider and be prepared to pay your buyer's agent for the right property. The next point is the seller offering compensation? So now that it's a mystery, when you hire a buyer's agent and you set up a tour on a Saturday morning to look at 5 properties, your agent, your buyer's agent, has to contact each one of those realtors that are representing those properties and ask them before they show it, that's required, are they offering buyer agent compensation? So you'll know before you show a property, before you look at a property, if that seller is willing to pay your agent a fee. And sometimes what you're going to find is maybe the seller is willing to pay a certain percentage, and if that is less than your agent is charging you, you would have to make up the difference. So you have to be prepared to pay the entire buyer agent fee, but I think oftentimes so far the seller's going to be willing to pay it, or certainly pay a portion of it, and your agent's going to have to call on each property to inquire if the seller will pay your agent. So these are changes we're bumbling through. It's only been a couple of weeks. It is certainly offering more challenges because all of a sudden these are also becoming part of the negotiations. So you're purchasing a property, you're negotiating terms, purchase price, home inspections, mortgage contingencies, but now you're also sometimes negotiating realtor fees in the middle of the transaction. So a lot more risk areas that could cause some stress and pressure for buyers and sellers. So as always, pick the right agent, make sure you have an experienced agent, and I'm ready to take your calls. Finally, as far as what's most important, I'm telling my clients, focus on your total net numbers. Meaning, when I sit down and work with a buyer, I'm running scenarios. We know what probable price point you're looking in, so I'm going to run a buyer's estimated closing costs, which include the closing fees, transfer taxes, all that stuff, and my buyer's agent fee. So at least you'll know, hey, I know worst case scenario, this is how much cash I'm going to need to go to the closing table. This is what the total transaction is going to cost me. This is going to be the total net cost of the transaction. So if you start with that, and it turns out that the seller is willing to pay the buyer's agent, okay, that'll be a pleasant surprise. But focus on the big picture of your total net to purchase the home and the price point you're looking in that includes the buyer agent fee, so you'll know your worst case scenario as you begin shopping. Finally, according along the lines of how these new rules are going to affect buyers, this month's quick link in the email, just go back to the home screen of my website, toddcostello.com, and click on the Serious Buyers link. It's a solid review of what buyers should be thinking about before they start looking at homes, and it's a really great reminder. So take a look at that. If you would this month, share this with a friend. It's a big change in the industry. Next month, we're going to talk more about how this is going to affect the seller's side of the transaction. As always, you can find me at toddcostello.com, and have a great month.